Hi everybody, welcome. It's the last day of the week for our tea at the Ritz. I hope you're sitting comfortably and enjoying yourself with a nice cup of tea or something bubbly if that takes your fancy. Um, I'm feeling better today. I was a bit cross yesterday, wasn't I, when I started the video. I've stopped watching the news. It seems to help my blood pressure. And I have found actually throughout the lockdown period that watching the news wasn't really supporting my mental health particularly well. I should have taken my own advice, and I didn't anyway. So I'm feeling a lot happier, a lot more positive, and I want to talk to you today about something incredibly important, which is following on from what I've been talking about on Wednesday and Thursday as well, and that's how to have a long, happy, healthy life. I know that this has sparked quite a big discussion on the Super Troopers page, and I think one of the things that I do want to say, just to reiterate, and I might have not made it as clear as I could have done, that when I'm talking about purpose and having sort of things to aim for and things to get up for in the morning, I'm not talking in a business sense of having to make long lists of all the things that you've got to get done and checklist lists and tick lists and all that sort of thing. I'm really not. I'm talking about seeing this third act of our life in a way that gives us satisfaction, happiness, and a sense of fulfillment. I love the Marie Kondo book. Do I love her book? Well, I haven't followed the guidelines in it. It's all about throwing out things out of your wardrobe and having them all in tidy, neat piles and stuff like that. I don't do that at all. But she has got something in that book I love, which is saying, when you look at a piece of clothing and you're going to decide what to do with it, you ask the question, does this spark my joy? Now, I think sparking joy is what I'm trying to get across when I talk about purpose. You could get up in the morning with the purpose to lie underneath a tree in the shade on a sunny day and reading a book. That's what I do a lot when I'm down in France, and that is my purpose for the day, and that fills me with joy. So I'm not talking about, people to meet, places to go, things to do. I'm talking about finding those things in your later years that give you a fulfilled, happy, and interesting life. And I just want to remind you that starting Look Fabulous Forever, two things about it I think are very important to say. One is that I started that because I was lost, very low in spirit, and I didn't know what to do with myself, my time, or the rest of my life. And I did think I might have another 30 years of this, and I can't spend them doing what I'm doing right now, which was not sparking my joy at all. And so Look Fabulous Forever was an idea that I had that grew out of that sense of despair. And I didn't start it to build a business. I really didn't. I didn't start it to make money, to have some kind of beauty empire, employ lots of people, sell products around the world. That was not my intention. My intention was entirely to have some fun and to play. Play with the money, see what I could do with it, see what came out of it, my intention was to have a hobby that would be with some products, talking to older women, showing them how they work, doing makeover parties, going around and meeting lots of people in that way. And it was going to be really small and really local, and it was just going to be something for me to do that I wanted to do, that sparked my joy, that I thought I would have fun with, and it changed into something entirely other. There was a time, certainly in the early days, when it became too much for me. And I can remember once going to a business networking group and sitting there and saying, this feels a bit like a monster that's starting to devour me. But it was because I was trying to do all of it myself. I didn't have any help. And then gradually I realised that I had to bring other people in. First of all, my daughter, and then somebody very importantly to help with customer services. And then my other daughter joined to help with all the operational stuff. And suddenly, I could go back to doing what I loved, and I could relax and enjoy it again, which is where I am now. So I'm not talking to you, as I said, about having, ought, shoulds, musts, do this, do that, do the other. The whole concept of sparking joy, having pleasure, having a purpose in life is whatever makes you feel really, really energized and happy. So I hope I've got that nice and clear, because I think it's a very important thing to say. And now I come on to something that's incredibly important to say, and that is, what can we do as we age to influence the way that we're aging, and how important is food in that role? Now, I want to tell you about something. It's a book that I read, and it's had quite a big effect on me. It's called The Telomere Effect. It's written by a woman who actually got a Nobel Prize for her work on telomeres. She's a physiologist. She won it in 2009. I think telomeres is how you pronounce it. Honestly, I've only read the word, and I've very rarely heard it actually spoken. So I don't think it's telomeres. I think it's telomeres. Anyway, if I'm pronouncing it wrong, you'll have to forgive me. Now, what are telomeres? Well, they are the things on the end of our chromosomes that are a little bit like those plastic tips that are on the end of shoelaces. They're called aglets, apparently. So you know how shoelaces have that little plastic tip, and the idea is that it stops the lace from unravelling. So if you think of our telomeres a bit like those aglets on the end of our shoelaces, they stop our DNA unravelling, and it is the shortening of the telomeres over time and the unravelling of the DNA that involves that creates the diseases of ageing. So the whole proposition in the book, The Telomere Effect, is that everything that you can do to help your telomeres to stay longer, to unravel less quickly, the better you will age. So you will age with less disease and, in better shape. Now, the book is full of lots and lots of different things. So it touches on stress, sleep, all those things that we know have a huge impact on us and whether we are okay. But the bit that I want to talk to you about today is the chapter on food. And the three things that are highlighted in this chapter that are very dangerous to us, and we need to do everything that we can to combat them, are, first of all, inflammation, secondly, oxidative stress, and the third is insulin resistance. Now, they're all obviously highly medical terms, but I'm going to try and explain each one in the simplest way that I can, that I have understood it. So I want to say loud and clearly, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a specialist, I'm just a normal person like you, and I have read this, interpreted it as I can, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm going to say it, in the terms that I've understood it, and it's the terms in which I've put it into practice in my own life, really, and it has made a huge difference to me. So I'm sort of speaking as a convert, if you like, and as somebody who has understood this to be important to me. So let's start with the whole idea of food and how much it does influence how long we live. Now let's look at those countries with the longest lived people in them. So South Korea tops the poll with an average age for the population of 90. It's just over 90. It's nearly 91. The next two are France is the next one, 88 years, 88.55 years, and Japan, 88.41 years. Now, what is it about those countries that have these long-lived people in them. A lot of it is to do with diet, is to do with what they eat. So if you look at the diet of the Asian diet that is very commonly eaten in South Korea and Japan, we're talking about a lot of fish, we're talking about rice, vegetables, not much in the way of hard fats, not much meat. So it's a diet that supports health in those older people that are in the population, and it's something that they will have followed most of their lives. So it's not what we would call a typical Western diet. We'll talk about what that is in a second or two. And then you've got France. Now, France is interesting because people in the south of France live longer than people in the north of France, and they have very different diets. So in the south of France, which is where the longest lived people are, their diet is predominantly Mediterranean. So again, it's very fish-based. It's also very vegetable-based, and it's fats which are liquid at room temperature, not solid. So obviously we're talking about olive oil and fats like that. It's also interesting that France has one of the lowest obesity rates in the world, and the average waist of a woman in France is much smaller than in some other countries. So we then come to us in the UK. We're doing pretty well on 85.25 years. This is for women, so we've not got the male figures in here. And then in the USA, it's around 82. So even in countries like the UK and the US, which are very affluent places with high levels of income for majority of the population and extremely good, sophisticated healthcare systems, our expected age of living is lower than those countries which have diets which are significantly different from ours. Where ours differ is that we tend to eat more meat, more fats that are solid at room temperature, and we also eat a lot more processed foods that your grandmother wouldn't recognise. That's quite a good rule of thumb. If your granny wouldn't know what it was, then it's probably not a good idea to eat it. In this country and in America as well, there is a huge role that's played by food manufacturers. Now, as soon as a manufacturer is involved in food, you're going to have a lot of stuff added to that food, which is not particularly good for you. So I'm talking about sugar, I'm talking about salt, and I'm also talking about additives which are put into foods in the processing of them that actually makes those foods much less good for our bodies, but much tastier and moreish. So, if you've had one packet of crisps, you probably want another packet of crisps. But eating a fresh, whole, new potato with a skin on is a very different experience for our bodies than eating crisps, which have been cooked in corn oil and other things, as I said, have been added like salt and so on and so forth to make them tastier, and then flavours. And those flavourings, again, make them very tasty, but they're not particularly good for our bodies. So I think you understand that this stuff is important. And so therefore, we're talking much more about fresher foods, foods that are not manufactured, that are not processed, and that have not been subject to various things which have made them tasty but are not so good for us. So let's go back to those three things I mentioned. What is inflammation? Well, inflammation is when we get a fever, and it's very relevant at the moment because we know that one of the symptoms of COVID-19 is a high temperature, and that is the body's immediate response to attack. So the virus comes in, attacks the body, and the immediate response, it's a very positive response. Fever is a sign that the body is going into a very strong reaction against and attack on the virus. We need the fever, we need the inflammation. But chronic inflammation is where the body is constantly being kept inflamed, and that inflammation is often caused by the food that we eat. So it's almost as though there's a fire burning in our body, and it's the foods that are fanning the flames of the fire. Now, quite a lot of autoimmune diseases like osteoarthritis, multiple sclerosis and things like that, where the body's immune system starts to attack itself, if you like, then inflammation can become an incredibly important part of the way that disease is felt. So pain in the joints and so on and so forth, chronic pain, and a huge amount can be done if a different diet is followed. Oxidative stress is where you have free radicals in the body, and you desperately need antioxidants to get rid of those free radicals. Now again, the things that stimulate free radicals in the diet are the kind of foods that I've been talking about, manufactured, processed foods, which our bodies, as I said, these free radicals are produced within the body, and we need to get rid of them. And the way to get rid of them is by making sure that our foods have sufficient antioxidants in them. And the final thing, insulin resistance, is all about sugar. So it's all about the way that our bodies process the extra sugar that we take in that we don't need. So we do need a certain level of sugar produced from, fructose, fruit, starch, carbohydrate, and so on and so forth. But if it comes from natural sources like fruit and vegetables and stuff like that, then our bodies can process that successfully. But if we have spikes of where our blood sugar suddenly zooms up, what happens subsequently is that we get a reaction to that, and not long afterwards we get a very, very severe reaction to that high blood sugar that we've got, and it can make us feel extremely unwell. Now, one of the reasons I cut out my 4 o'clock piece of cake was that I was getting a reaction about an hour later. I'd have the cake about 4 o'clock, and about 5 o'clock I'd feel terrible, and I'd sort of start to shake, and my stomach would feel very very weird, like I was empty. I wanted to eat something, but I knew that if I ate something sugary, I'd feel worse. So the thing that I would then think is that I must eat some protein. So I'd have a lump of cheese or something like that. But I realised that the thing I needed to do was cut out the cake, and I wouldn't have that reaction. And actually, since I've stopped eating a slug of high sugar carbohydrate food like cake at 4 o'clock, I no longer get that high blood sugar reaction an hour later. So, of course, what are we talking about? Well, this will come as no surprise to you. I'm going to get it from here. So, telomere tips from my book. Inflammation, insulin resistance, and oxidative stress are your enemies. To fight them, follow what's been called a prudent pattern of eating. So, you eat plenty of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, along with low-fat, high-quality sources of protein. This pattern is also known as the Mediterranean diet. So we know that those people who live around the Mediterranean have longer lives and are healthier than those people who don't live around the Mediterranean. We've seen that, I talked about that, I think, on Wednesday. Icaria in Greece, Sardinia, some of the longest lived centenarians are in those places because of the diet that they eat. And of course, same goes for Japan and South Korea. So consume sources of omega-3s, salmon, tuna, leafy vegetables, and flax oil and flax seeds. Omega-3, so I've asked for salmon recipes this week. Thank you. I've started cooking salmon with a little bit of mixture of a sort of almost like a marinade of soy sauce and honey. Now I know I'm adding sugar to that, but just a small amount just really peps the salmon up. So thank you. And I'm going to be doing others of those salmon recipes. I've got one today which involves spinach, I think sun-dried tomatoes, and something else that sounds absolutely delicious. And I'm going to have a go at that one too. The next thing is minimise red meat, particularly processed meat. So we're talking about bacon, sausages, things like that. You might try to go vegetarian for at least a few days each week. Eliminating meat can benefit your cells as well as the environment. Now, I quite like meat, and I do every now and again treat myself to some meat-based meals and chicken, because I think it is quite good for me. But I would say I'm 5 days a week I will eat fish, and on a couple of days, one day I might eat chicken, and on the other day I might allow myself some red meat. And finally, really, really do avoid sugary foods and drinks and processed foods. Now, none of that is rocket science, I don't think. I hope I've explained why inflammation, oxidative stress, and insulin resistance are the three things that those foods that we know are not very good for us create in our bodies. I've radically changed my diet over the last 2 years, and I can honestly say that I feel, well, 100% better. I really do. So I can thoroughly recommend it. And again, I hope you don't think that I'm doing this shoulds, oughts and musts. I'm not at all. I'm trying to present to you some, I hope, useful information that will make a difference to you going forward, because I think the goal of a long, happy and healthy old age is something that we can all aim towards. So thank you very much for listening. I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, because the Ritz videos that I'm going to be doing are going to be on Tuesdays and Fridays going forward. So I'll be back here to see you on those days. We'll be sending you an email at 4 o'clock to remind you. And the rest of the time, I am going to be making quite a lot of shorter videos about all sorts of things, style, hair, makeup, and so on and so forth. They'll be posted on the Facebook Super Troopers page, but I'll also be doing them. They'll also be on YouTube as well if you want to watch them. So I hope you'll enjoy those as well. But I'll meet you next Tuesday for tea at the Ritz. So thank you for watching. Bye-bye.